Welcome to Localite, everybody. John Compton here. Thanks for joining me. Today I have Rip Caswell, and you probably have seen his work if you've ever driven through downtown Troutdale. He's had a gallery there for many years, and he does amazing bronze sculptures. So it's my pleasure to have Rip on the show. And you came all the way from Troutdale clear out to the other end almost, the Dells.
Beautiful drive.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. So tell me a bit about your professional background. Like, how did you get into, I mean, where does somebody start? You don't go to school to be a sculptor, I don't think. I don't know.
There are some artists that do go to school to be a sculptor. I had a more organic way of learning, and I really feel it was a gift presented to me. And a lot of times our greatest tragedies become our greatest strengths that we draw from. And at this time I was about 10 years old and I lost my brother. And we lived in northeastern Washington. We were very remote, and so I spent a lot of time just out in nature. And I found nature was healing, and I was fishing and I found this natural water-based clay on the bank, and I just started playing with it, and pretty soon it got hard in the sun, and I saw my fingerprints were cast in that, and I think it captured my heart at the same time. And so I got more of that clay, and it felt good, and I started making sculptures and animals and all the things that I had admired and loved, and it was
all out of the clay that this
it was out of this
clay?
Natural earth
Really?
that was just presented to me as a gift. And I felt so alive and refreshed, and it just healed me. And so as I healed, then I started celebrating all the beauty I saw around me. And my dad was a professional hunter, a guide and outfitter, and so we lived in very remote areas. As a baby, I lived, he cut trails into the national forest and stuff, and we lived in a wall tent, and so my whole life has been in nature from the time I was born until now, and it's just always been such an important part of who I am. And so I was always around these animals. He'd pack me on his back into the woods, and I'd see elk fighting and bugling, and I just saw some really amazing things that inspired me. And so I just would release that in the clay, and it just has always been a part of my life. And I just never, I tell people, kids and stuff, I said, I started playing with Play-Doh and I just never quit.
Well, how do you, it's so intricate though. I mean, your work is so amazing, and I know when you were probably a kid standing along the banks scooping up the clay.
It was pretty crude.
It was probably pretty crude. But still, when did you start to see that pivotal point where you were like, wow, I'm really good at this, I have a gift?
I don't think I ever have. That's the agony and ecstasy of being an artist, is we're always criticizing our own work, and everyone always asks me, what's your favorite piece you've ever done? I say it's the next one, because in my mind that next one's perfect.
The next one's perfect.
So it's that striving to get better constantly. But what happened was, because my dad was a guide and outfitter and I loved art, and he saw this, and his knowledge of art was taxidermy. And so he had a really good eye for quality and detail. And so he introduced me to a guy in Beaver Creek, Oregon, that was in his mind at that time, was the best he'd ever seen. And so he told the guy, he says, I have this young boy, it's very artistic. Would you, mentor him and take him under your wings? And so I would drive down. I turned 16 and I started driving down on weekends and working for him. And I loved it, and I caught on really quick to it. And he saw this young prodigy, basically, that he could impart his 40 years of experience in, and really bring somebody up alongside of him. And so I went to work for him out of high school, and I started doing work, and we started competing in competitions. And I didn't even really realize all that I was learning, or how it would all.
And this is in the taxidermy
Yeah, this
business?
is in taxidermy. But
Okay.
what we would do, and I used to be really embarrassed of this, and I wouldn't tell anybody because it was just, you know, I mean, I felt weird.
About the taxidermy thing?
Yeah.
Really?
But then I went to Italy, and I saw what Michelangelo and Da Vinci did, and how it wasn't very politically correct in those days to study the cadavers, but they knew that they needed to understand the bones and the muscles and the tendons, and the only way they could do it was to dissect it. And so that's what we did. We would dissect an animal, take every muscle off, we would measure it, calibrate it, draw it, and number it, and all the way down to its bones, and then we would boil those bones, reconstruct it, and then in clay layer each of those muscles and tendons out and create our own forms and mannequins, because we were competing on a high level, and there wasn't forms on the market anatomically correct enough, and we wanted our own unique poses. And so this is where I learned how to really sculpt and really study that reference and look at photographs, look at video footage, and then look at the real animal.
Because in taxidermy, you are basically forming that animal in a pose.
Yes, yeah, we're putting them in motion, and the more motion and movement you can capture, the better. And we got really good at the anatomy. And so then I wanted to capture more than just the anatomy. I wanted to capture the spirit of that animal, and I knew it was in the eyes. And so I would really pay careful attention to how I would set the eyes and the eyelids and the expressions. And I started winning awards. And anyway, I went on my own and branched out. And in 1991, I won Best in the Nation at it, and it was actually an international competition. There were competitors from all over the world, but it was called the Nationals. And that was a very exciting time. But yet I come back to my studio. Here I was the best in the entire nation, if not the world. I had won every goal that I had set for myself, and I couldn't make a living. I mean, I was struggling, and I mean, it was so bad that you know, people would come in with a fresh pheasant, and I'm like, "When did you kill this?" You know, and I'd take the meat. And that's what I ate. You know,
seriously?
I mean, yeah, it was tough times.
Really?
And because I was such a perfectionist, I would spend so much time on that project, but you couldn't ask a person to pay that much for the piece.
Right, and you obviously couldn't make a living off of it.
I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, and I talked to other people, and they said, well, you got to get into the supply business, you got to do something else, and so it was really a crossroads that I met, and decided I've got to figure out something a little different. You know,
which must have brought you into sculpture.
That brought me back into sculpture.
Yeah, which I want to talk about when we return. So, Rip Caswell is my guest on Localite today. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about how he actually sculpts his amazing creatures and all of that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.